NHL insiders reveal shocking news that Brock Boeser may be hitting the market as Canucks management are afraid of losing more assets with no return heading into trade deadline. We're going to break all this down and more later on this episode, but before we get into it, I just want to give a huge shout out to Coho for being huge supporters of this channel. Coho is Canada's leading fintech alternative to traditional banking, designed to help you spend smarter, save better, and even build your credit all in one app. Coho is a Canadian company that offers a 4% interest rate on your entire balance, and this is a non-promotional rate, which means it's one of the highest interest rates in Canada. With Coho, you can earn up to 2% cash back on everyday spending like groceries, eating out, and transportation, but it doesn't stop there. Coho makes building credit easier than ever before, and the average Coho user sees their credit score rise by 22 points in just 3 months. Plus, there are no hidden fees. You can earn up to 4% interest on your balance and even get a cash advance of up to $250 interest-free. Coho makes managing your money fun and effortless, and the best part, your funds in the Coho account are insured by the Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation up to $100,000. Are you ready to take control of your finances? Click the link in the description or the pinned comments and use the code Canucks20 to get a $20 Canadian reward when you sign up and add $20 to your account. Check them out, and thank you once again for Coho for sponsoring this video. Once again, I want to give a huge shout out to Coho. But with that, Griffin, let's just hop straight into the first topic today, which is we've seen a report coming from Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects saying sources indicate that many teams expect Brock Boeser to be available at deadline, barring a serious Canucks turnaround. If he does stay through the season, he'll likely be available on July 1st, and a healthy group will be vying for his service on a long-term deal. Something the Canucks very wary of doing this time. Now looking at this, the biggest thing is the speculation really started once we've seen the Colorado Avalanche go out, trade their UFA in Mikko Rantanen when not able to hit a contract extension with him. I know this was a huge deal, and the biggest thing is Mikko Rantanen almost feels like a tier above Brock, and that's not hating on Brock, but we see the asset management coming from a contending team in the Colorado Avalanche. We know Patrik Allvin has already came out and spoke on this just a few weeks ago, saying we're still evaluating him. I have a great relationship with his agent, and when the time is right, we'll make the decision. This was on signing Brock. Griffin, looking at this, like I said, we've seen Colorado go out, asset management, move on from a guy they knew they couldn't sign. We're going to see a similar thing happen to Brock if we don't see them make the signing before the trade deadline. I mean, we've seen Patrik Allvin already express losing both Lindholm and Zadrov. Going in free agency to the Boston Bruins was almost a gut punch, coming from two assets they could have moved on from at the end of the season. Looking at all this, do you think there is a strong possibility that this team looks to move on from Brock if they can have something signed by trade deadline?
I think unfortunately the answer is yes. And when it rains, it pours with this team, because look at how we were feeling going into this season with these players and how we had this roster looking. And look at where we're at now. Now we're at risk of losing Brock Boeser, JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, and if we go into a rebuild, which will likely happen after we lose those guys, Quinn Hughes as well. So 4 of our best players going right out the door. Yeah, we got Kiefer Sherwood, and we got Kevin Lankinen, and we got some other guys, Connor Garland as well. But Jake DeBrusk, are they going to be able to hold the fort down and be the leaders of this team going forward and be able to fill in those shoes of those 4 players? Absolutely not. So this is something where you've known how I've felt about this Brock Boeser situation. Everyone who watches this show knows how I feel. But just one more time, I can't say this enough, that Brock Boeser is the most valuable Canuck that we have outside of Quinn Hughes. We know what Quinn Hughes means to this team. We know what this team is like with and without him. But when you look at Brock Boeser, people can say what they want about his injuries, his age, and things like that. But when you look at the goals that he scored, yeah, he's not in the top 3 of goal scorers by the end of the season, or he's not even in the level of JC Miller and Elias Pettersson as far as production is concerned. But when you look at where those goals come, except for that Edmonton one in the clip that you just showed, but you look at when his goals come and when he scores, it's at the most pivotal moments. It's the clutch goals, whether it's to seal a game, spark a comeback, or put the team on his back saying, hey, follow me and I will lead us into victory. We saw that many times, not only in this course of just this season, but even last season and just in years past as well. There's a long history of that, with Brock Boeser being that most valuable and the clutch Canuck that we need. So moving on from him, I know he's going to bring a big price tag, and I know what the Canucks struggles lately going on, but they aren't too far out of a playoff spot. I know we talk about this team as if the sky is falling and the house is burning and we're just sitting here going, everything's fine, but it's not. But it is in the sense that where the Canucks can go on a run, if they can go on a little bit of a heater here and there and have some less missteps than they do the wins. We know the wins haven't been very consistent, but they can go on a bit of a run here where they start flipping that overall win-loss record, where they start winning a lot more games than they're losing. I think we can see this Canucks team kind of turn it around and get back into a big playoff race. The big concern is, can they still be contenders or go on that run without some of these key pieces? That's a big question. I think the answer is definitely no, they can't. But if they're able to keep these pieces and kind of salvage this season at the last second and keep these guys around for one more run, hopefully they can turn it around and make a good run here.
And I mean, looking at Brock, we've seen him have a career year last year, potting 40 goals in 81 games. He went into the playoffs and was a point per game before going down with an injury. The biggest thing with Brock is, of course, the contract. 3-year deal. He's on the end of this at $6.65 million. He has a modified no trade clause with 10 teams as well. He'll be a UFA at the end of the year. So he does have some leverage with this team. There's at least 10 teams that he submitted a list to the Vancouver Canucks that he will not be traded to. I'm guessing these are teams that are in the current state of rebuilding or in a state of not even rebuilding but not being a contender. So Brock does have leverage with this team. But the biggest problem is, as we were talking about, this is a team that lost 2 valuable assets in Lindholm and Zadrov after giving up a king's ransom. And I won't say king's ransom, actually, as they were good trades coming from the Canucks, but they lost these asset management, and it doesn't seem like they want this to happen again. If the Canucks go on a run, yes, they could move on from Brock Boeser, moving into July 1st so another team can get rights to sign him first. I mean, we've seen it happen with Chris Tanev and the Toronto Maple Leafs getting a small bit back for a guy so they get the exclusive rights heading into July 1st. But the biggest thing is they don't want to lose these players. And I mean, we seen Jim yesterday in that article talking about moving on from their 2 best forwards, and these 2 forwards being Petey and Miller. But the biggest thing is looking at this where he says when you're planning on peaking this team into a contending team and you find out that's not going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen with the group we have now, then you have to put together a new plan. He went in, like you said, to speak on if this team went into a rebuild. It does seem like Quinn Hughes will be leaving this team as well. It's getting very interesting. And listen, I love Brock Boeser. I think Brock Boeser is a huge part of this team. But if you get into the signing date of trade deadline and you're looking at this guy and he looks and says, hey, I want 10 million, which is not going to be 10. It seems like it's going to be around 8.5 to 9 million. If he looks at the team, you can't come to an agreement and you know you're losing him. Maybe moving them for other assets might be the best bet. As hard as it is, you can't consistently have these guys on 1-year deals or at the end of an expiring deal, losing them for nothing and just repeating it. This is not how successful seasons work for teams. But looking at the Canucks, Brock is a UFA going into the end of the year. You have Pius Suter going into the end of the year as a UFA. You have a couple other guys towards bottom, Ratu, Max Sass, and Linus Karlsson. These guys will probably come back on cheaper contracts. When you're looking at the team going into the offseason, though, if the cap raises to about $92.5 million, they will have about $13.3 million going in with a roster like this constructed. I do have guys like Jonathan Lekermak and Neil Zaman put down on the bottom as we're not sure where they'll play in the lineup. But looking at this lineup, Griffin, if Brock comes to this team and says, hey, I want a noticeable raise, if this might be a situation of, hey, I want 2 to 3 extra million, I want 7 to 8 years, would you commit to that? Or would you kind of be a bit wary with his age, with his injury history, which does seem like it is in the past from a bit? Looking at this, is this a contract you'd be fine going with? Or is it something you'd be worried that wouldn't age well for this Canucks team?
I'm trying to put my Brock Boeser bias aside, trying to answer this question, because on right away I would say absolutely pay him. He's worth it. But what I will say is that anyone looking at that on paper, just saying, if they didn't know that it was Brock Boeser, if they were just looking at things like you said, the age, the injury history, but also seeing the production, I don't think a lot of teams would do that. But if you remove that and say, hey, it is coming from Brock Boeser, teams might be more inclined to do that. However, with this Canucks team, I think Brock might be, I'm not saying this is for sure, but I think he might be inclined to take a slight bit of a pay cut. Probably not exactly what he's at right now. He'll probably want a little bit more than he's getting right now. but because of how much he loves this city and this community and what he means to this community as well, with the things that he's done off the ice within the communities and outside the organization and things like that, I think he has proven that he might be inclined to take a bit of a pay cut to stay in Vancouver, kind of like we saw with Harrison Smith done with the Vikings over the past few seasons, and other players throughout their whole career where they take pay cuts so they can keep other guys while still getting a bit of their bag. And hopefully this could be a case where Brock Boeser might fall into that. However, like the things that you said there, as an objective hockey fan, I would have to say, no, I wouldn't sign that contract. But as a Canucks fan, knowing it's Brock Boeser, I absolutely would. So I know I'm kind of playing both sides of the fence there. However, that's just coming from somebody who wants to keep Brock and this massive part of this team together within the 4 players that we have.
And I mean, looking at this going in, I think it's going to be kind of an interesting situation, especially where we've seen someone like Mike Grier of the San Jose Sharks go into the season saying, I want to keep Mackenzie Blackwood, this player I want to keep. They got an offer, and he came out and said it was an offer too good to resist. I could see this being a situation where Patrik Allvin says, hey, if we're in a playoff spot, let's hold on to Brock. They're only a few points out as we record this, so they really could go on a run. But if you get to trade deadline, he's not in a position to put this team as a contender. You get an offer that's almost too good to resist. Maybe there's a first-round pick, a prospect, a roster player, whatever it might be. Then you pull the trigger, but I also could see him really holding off, maybe pushing into the playoffs, see what this team can do before making a major change. What were your guys' thoughts on this? What's your thoughts on all the rumors around the Canucks? I know yesterday was the JT and PD situation coming from Jim's own mouth. What's your thoughts on someone like Cam Robinson just coming out and saying expect Brock Boeser to be available at deadline unless the Canucks have a serious turnaround? It's not a fun time to be the Canucks, but listen, the future is going to be bright. This is something hopefully we can put in the past, not only next year, but as soon as this year. Let me know down in the comments right down there. Leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back with another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Griffin, and take care.